I don't even know how we got there, because I tried to make it clear how many civil rights, it doesn't just boil down to one conversation, but I can see that somebody's campaign coffers really are struggling right now.
You all want men with penises, chicks with in the bathroom with us. You want women to be forced to undress in front of men in the locker room and in dressing rooms. And it's so hypocritical for you to sit here and say and be, you know, screaming from the rooftops about the right to privacy and civil rights when you don't respect women. And you don't respect women who've been raped, women who are victims of sexual abuse. And you want me, a victim of rape, a survivor of rape, to go into a locker room and be forced to undress in front of a man? You have to be kidding me. So I don't want to hear about you talk about rights, individual rights, civil rights, because you can't find the courage from the 60s to fight for women all around America. Fight for women like me, every single woman.
She gonna keep saying trans, 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 so that people will feel threatened. And child, listen, I want y'all to tell me whether or
Do
not.
not call me a child. I am no child.
I want
Don't
to
even
find
start.
out
I am a grown
which
woman.
of those
I am 47 years
emails
old. I have broken
actually
more
have.
glass ceilings than you
Chairman,
ever
I
will.
am reclaiming my
Let's go.
time.
You will not do that. I
Order.
am not a child.
Chairman,
I am
am
not a
reclaiming
child.
my time.
If you want to take it outside,
Mr. Chairman, the committee is
Chairman.
not
Okay,
in order.
all right. Order.
Point of order.
So many of you know that I practice law, but some of you don't realize that I actually was a business major out of Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. And the emphasis that I got in my business degree was on finance. And as I traveled the country campaigning this election cycle, one of the things that I talked about was this idea that in finance, we always promote this idea of diversity. If you know anything about a portfolio, the one thing that you want to do is make sure that it's as diverse as possible, because at times certain stocks will perform better than others, and they will exemplify various strengths and weaknesses. And together, a diverse portfolio is usually what any good finance person would promote. They wouldn't promote that you solely invest in vanilla wafers, believing that that is going to be the strongest portfolio, but instead they may want to add some chocolate cake and some Twinkies into the mix to make sure that we have the best portfolio, because there will be different preferences by different people, and again, there will be different strengths. But as I sit here and I think about what we say and what I'm hearing as it relates to diversity when it comes to anything outside of making money, and to be clear, we are losing GDP every time we try to push back on this idea of diversity, because all of us bring something different to the table. But you consistently said over and over the word oppression, and every time that you said it, it was almost as if I was hearing nails on a chalkboard, because it seems like you don't understand the definition of oppression, and I'd ask you to just refer to Google to help you out. Oppression is the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control. That is the definition of oppression. And so as I sit here as a Black woman who practiced civil rights, let me tell you, the reason that my colleagues wanted to make sure you understood the same Black history that your side of the aisle wants to delete out of classrooms is because you can then misuse words like oppression. There has been no oppression for the white man in this country. You tell me which white men were dragged out of their homes. You tell me which one of them got dragged all the way across an ocean and told that you are going to go and work. We are going to steal your wives. We are going to rape your wives. That didn't happen. That is oppression. We didn't ask to be here. We're not the same migrants that y'all constantly come up against. We didn't run away from home. We were stolen. So yeah, we are going to sit here and be offended when you want to sit here and act like, and don't let it escape you that it is white men on this side of the aisle telling us, people of color on this side of the aisle, that y'all are the ones being oppressed, that y'all are the ones that are being harmed. That's not the definition of oppression. You tell me the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment that you've had, and we can have a conversation.
You could start with Exodus.
The final thing that I will say on this particular issue, two things. There is an article from The Guardian, and it is a little old. It's from 2021, so I apologize. But it said that back then, just 3 years ago, White men represent 30% of the population, but 62% of office holders. These are the issues that we are constantly looking at and recognizing and trying to say, is this just? I can't even tell you how many white men have served in this chamber, but I can tell you that I am only the 55th black woman to be elected to Congress. And so when you want to talk about history and pretend as if it was so long ago, it wasn't. Because again, I am just number 55. Finally, when we start to talk about what do these numbers do as we're trying to say that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the problem, the reality is that when it comes to financial performance, companies with more diverse workforces are more likely to outperform their competitors. Companies in the top quartile for racial diversity are 35% more likely to outperform their peers on profitability. Companies with diverse executive teams are 25% more likely to generate greater profits. Diverse companies earn 2.5 times higher cash flow per employee. Diversity works. And until you can show me data that says otherwise, I think that we need to go back to being a country that listens to experts and gets out of our feelings and recognizes, again, that racism is real in this country. And until we stop pretending that it's not, we will not solve the problems that we are consistently facing. And that will bring real unity that we seek when we're looking for a more perfect union.
Does any other member seek recognition?
So I have a series of questions for you, Mr. Santos, that are yes or no. And so I would ask that you use yes or no when I ask these questions. Did the U.S. Census Bureau do anything to identify the immigration or citizenship status of individuals surveyed during the 2020 census, yes or no?
No.
Are illegals counted in the census, yes or no?
Yes, if they're permanent residents, if they reside in the U.S.
Okay, so when you're doing the census with folks and asking the question, you're asking them if, you're not asking them if they're a citizen, you're asking, do you ask if they're a permanent resident?
We ask folks to list everyone who lives at that residence.
Okay, but you're saying you're only counting illegals if they're a permanent resident.
Well, if they live at that residence. It's the interpretation of the instructions of the person.
So your definition of permanent residence is that they live at a place in the U.S., at a U.S. address.
Yes, I believe I misspoke because there's a legal definition to permanent, to permanent resident. It's someone who usually lives at that address.
So I'm going to ask the question again. Are illegal aliens, criminal illegal aliens, the people that break the law coming into our country when they enter in the door illegally, are they counted in the U.S. Census, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Are there political implications for congressional apportionment and the Electoral College when we're counting non-citizens, when we're counting illegals, criminal illegal aliens in the census, yes or no?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
Are there political implications for congressional apportionment and the Electoral College when you are counting criminal illegal aliens in the U.S. Census?
I do not know.
Oh, you absolutely know. Because apportionment is based on what? Is it based on what? Population?
Yes.
Population based on counts in the what? U.S. Census?
Correct.
All right. You're the director of the U.S. Census Bureau, correct?
Correct.
Why is this so difficult for you to answer honestly?
Well, no, it is what it is. So if there's more population, then you get.
You just said you didn't know if there were political implications for congressional apportionment in the Electoral College when you're counting illegals.
In all honesty, I am not a politician. I'm a scientist, and so we do our counts according to the Constitution.
Okay, Mr. Science.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
When you're doing apportionment, we're doing congressional seats based on population that includes illegal aliens. Does that have a political impact in campaigns when you're drawing those lines and having people vote in those elections?
They are counted in apportionment, yes.
Okay. You're not being honest this morning, and I think it's a slap in the face to the American people.
It is interesting that we're having this hearing, and I know one thing that I have learned so far is that while freshman orientation just ended, we need a course on what the census is for, because we have people sitting in Congress and have no idea what the census is for. And so I do appreciate that you have talked about what the funding is for, but it seems like my colleagues really want to zero in on southern states. So let's talk about Texas for a second. And let's deal with them and their concerns about their districts, and let's also talk about the citizen situation. So, I don't know how much you've paid attention to the election, but we do have an incoming administration, and we have a border czar who has said that they are going to deport everyone that is here and is not a citizen. They are planning to do mass deportations. In fact, in the state of Texas, our commissioner has offered up land so that they can put these camps there and send people out of our country. Now, if you start asking people, are you a citizen or not, and they're living in a home and somebody's threatening to go in and raid homes and take everybody out and send them back to wherever they came from, I mean, I would imagine that that may make people say, never mind, I'm not going to fill this out. But I mean, has that been your finding or no?
We have conducted research that shows that there can be selective inclusion of individuals who reside in a residence because of
Exactly, because you've got the federal government that is asking this question, and it's the same federal government that is threatening to go and yank people out of their schools, their homes, and things like that. And then we just had a conversation where we were talking about how many voters. Listen, when you're counting people, you're not just counting voters. You count children, don't you?
Correct.
You count a lot of people that aren't necessarily voters, and I want to make sure that we really get to the nitty-gritty on Texas, because this is hilarious to me. Texas added 2 seats. In 2020, according to the census, and we know that there was a significant undercount, specifically in Texas for a combination of reasons, but we know that specifically Texas added 4 million people. Of those 4 million people, do you want to take a guess at how many were Anglos? Just a guess.
I'd say a majority.
180,000. That's it, of 4 million. 95% of the people that were added, and we know that when it comes to minority populations, they tend to be undercounted. So get this, we added 4 million people. They were people of color. Texas got 2 new seats. So they took those black and brown and Asian bodies, and guess what? Do you think that we got a new black, brown, or Asian seat? Somehow, the way that they do their Republican math in the state of Texas, that amounted to 2 new white seats. Guess what? White Republican seats. We got 2 new Republican seats out of 4 million people of color. So let me tell you, they love to use our bodies to apportion us in an inaccurate way. Thank you, Mr. Chair. During the 118th Congress, Oversight Republicans disbanded one of the most important subcommittees in Congress, the Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. And now in the 119th Congress, the chairman and House Republicans have decided to prioritize the demands of the real president, Elon Musk, and his billionaire friends over the needs of the American people. Now, we are about to approach the birthday of Martin Luther King. It's actually tomorrow. And on January 20th will be the inauguration of Donald Trump, but it will also be the observation of MLK Day. And the fact that we have decided that in this country we are not going to honor civil rights should be something that we all take issue with. Considering the fact, for some that don't know what civil rights are about, because some people only believe that it deals with black folk, let me explain. Civil and political rights are a class of rights that protect individuals' freedom from the infringement by governments, social organizations, and private individuals. They ensure one's entitlement to participate in the civil and political life of society and the state. Defined another way, the right to be free from discrimination, the freedom to worship as we choose, the right to vote for our elected representatives, the protections of due process, the right to privacy. If any of that sounds familiar, it is because these are rights that are born out of our Constitution, something that we all supposedly have sworn an oath to, and we swear to not only, we don't just swear to it, we are supposed to protect those rights. Interestingly enough, we just had the funeral of one of our beloved presidents. And I caught a flight to Austin on the day of the funeral. And I had the honor of sitting next to someone who was a little familiar with the White House. That person was Lucy Baines Johnson. And when I tell you that she is a wealth of information, I really mean that. And when we had an opportunity to talk about what she experienced as her father was president during a time in which, honestly, our country was on fire, and I would argue that, unfortunately, our country is on fire right now. When I first ran for office, I ran for the State House and said that we were in the midst of a modern-day civil rights movement, and I have not been convinced otherwise just yet. But this is the daughter of the president that signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. She was also there when he signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And to be perfectly honest, without that voting rights, I don't believe that I actually would have a seat in Congress. And so I do believe in preserving the fact that everyone should be entitled to real and true representation, because I do have a Section 2 seat as our Voting Rights Act has been decimated. But one of the stories that she told me was that her father asked her about coming over to the Congress for the signing of the bill as it relates to the Voting Rights Act. Now, for her, it was a bit inconvenient as an 18-year-old to have to leave the White House and go over to Congress. And she asked her father, why should we go over to the Congress, Daddy, to sign this particular bill? And she said, we need to go over to the Congress because we need to pay due respect to those members of Congress that knew that voting for this bill meant that they would not be returning to Congress, but they had the courage to do what was right for this country and make sure that everyone's voices were going to be heard. The one thing that we could do, the very small thing that we could do, is have a little bit of courage and decide that we are going to reinstitute this particular subcommittee, because unfortunately, I don't see the type of courage that the people that served back in the 60s had coming out of some of our colleagues. And so I'm asking you to do the courageous thing today and just institute a subcommittee that would make sure that we are looking out for those protections of everyone in this country, to make sure that we have real freedom, something that we all supposedly espouse to believe in. And with that, I will yield.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Any member seek recognition?
Yes.
Mr. Higgins? Oh, Ms. Mace was first. I'm sorry. Ms. Mace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I don't know what's going on today. I find it extremely rich and offensive. So we're talking about civil rights. I'm the former ranking member on the Civil Rights Subcommittee, something I believe in civil rights and civil liberties of all Americans. And we were talking about infringement of individual people. Also, quote, the right to privacy of individuals. Coming from a party that can't define what a woman is and won't give women the right to privacy. As a rape survivor, I shouldn't have to explain to you why women have rights and why women, when we're in the bathroom, when we're in the locker room, when we're in a dressing room, why I don't feel safe when there is a man nearby. And the fact that we're going here and we're going to say all these things is the ripeness of hypocrisy on the Hill. People need to tell the truth. And if we're going to talk about the rights of individuals, we have to talk about it. Everybody has rights, including women. And at some point, men are infringing on the rights of women. We just had it today. We just had a vote about protecting women and girls in sports. And I believe it wasn't one, it was two people from the Democrat Party who voted to protect women's rights in sports today. Two. So this is, Mr. Chairman, this is a deeply offensive conversation to me today. We want to talk about real freedom. Women have freedom in this country. Women have the freedom to go to a private women's only space and not see a man in it. Women have the right to change and not be feared that somebody with their sexual perversion, someone who's confused about their gender, we have the right to feel safe in these spaces. We have the right to know that we're not going to have trans people filming us in the bathroom. How many of these trannies are taking selfies? These men are taking selfies in women's spaces, in the bathroom. It's gross. It's disgusting. So if we're going to talk about civil rights, let's talk about the rights of women in this country and how you are stripping them away every single day. And you're doing it in your legislation, you're doing it in your messaging, you're doing it on X. You're making women feel unsafe in this country. And you're making the opportunity for women and girls to be raped, to be sexually abused in this country even greater than they've ever been. So don't come over here with your attitude and talk to me about rights when you're trying to take my rights as a woman, a rape survivor, away. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The final points that I was going to make is while this amendment has to do with civil rights, for whatever reason, the colleague on the other side of the aisle decided to attack Democrats and pretend as if we do not look out for women. And I want to be clear that it's Democrats that were pushing for the Equal Rights Amendment, and I don't recall any Republicans supporting us having the Equal Rights Amendment. I also want to make it clear that just because someone fantasizes or wants to be dramatic about the idea of someone could be a quote-unquote man in a locker room or in a bathroom, I've yet to hear an actual testimony of someone who, for whatever reason, has experienced this in real time. But I can tell you some real numbers and some real facts, because I don't like to live in fantasy when I'm talking about how I'm going to govern for the American people. The facts are, in my state alone, in the state of Texas, once they decided that they were going to overturn the Roe decision, 26,000 women then ended up raped. 26,000 is what we had reported. And that was only within about a year's time span. And when they reported those rapes, none of them seemed to have anything to do with trans folk. And I don't recall any legislation to help out those women in Texas and beyond that are actually dying. We're not projecting may die, but are actually dying or have died in southern states that have decided that they wanted to go after our reproductive freedom. So as a woman in this country, as a Texan, and as a Black woman who, when we look at the numbers, and I believe in data and science, and I know that that escapes a lot of people in this chamber, but the numbers are clear that specifically Black women have always struggled when it came down to the maternal mortality rates in general. The fact that somebody who looks like me, no matter how much money they have, because I can remind you of a very wealthy tennis star that almost lost her life while trying to give birth. Some things I honestly just don't think should be partisan, and frankly, I do believe in privacy because honestly, I don't want none of y'all making decisions if I ever end up pregnant and have to decide what it takes for me to save my life. And I give the same opportunity for other women in this country to make decisions as they see fit. So while we look at how we protect women completely differently, I can tell you that at least in the 766,000 women or 766,000 constituents that I represent, I have had them come to me concerned about whether or not they could survive childbirth. But I have not had a single person in my district tell me that they were concerned that they may be raped by a trans person. So if there is an issue to solve in this country based on facts, data, and statistics, I think that we need to look at the type of health care that we are going to advance for women in this country. And with that, I will yield.